Welcome to the Redhead Reveal podcast. I am Jenn Pinkerton, your Redhead host, a psychotherapist, high-performance coach, writer, and speaker. As a connection expert, I help people reveal their connectedness within relationships, transforming from the root causes of beliefs and behaviors that hold them back from thriving in life. Let's talk about how you're thriving. Okay, so I'm excited to welcome Dr. Lee Phillips today. Dr. Phillips is the expert on sex and relationship therapy with monogamous and non-monogamous couples, sex, and disability. And everybody who listens knows that I really think that if we cannot talk about sex, why are we having it? So I have brought the expert to talk about sex today. So welcome, Dr. Phillips.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Those of my audience or viewers who haven't followed you, I really want to encourage everybody to do that. And we'll link all of your socials because I think you put out such great information. And I know that you've really, because you are such an expert, you've had a lot of media in so many different magazines. I think you were in Men's Health recently. I mean, I'm always seeing something, and people really look to you to guide us in these difficult and challenging conversations around sex. So, I can't wait to learn some things from you today. I know that one of the main thing that stands out for you is about the challenges in sex and dating for Gen Z and millennials. So why don't we just start there and hit me with what your thoughts are about all that?
Yeah, I'm working on my first book, which is called Better Mating, Better Dating, How to Get Curious About Your Partner and Creative with Sex. And I wanted to write this book because of everything that I see in my office with these two generations. Mm-hmm. I have these young people coming in and they really don't know how to go about dating. They're on apps, but they have decision fatigue on them. They start chatting with someone, but then they chat with someone else. Then the chat falls off. And there's so many different apps out there. And so it's trying to find what's going to work for them and getting back out there and dating again. I think the pandemic had a lot to do with it. Now that COVID has receded, they're wondering, what do I do? Where do I go? I got used to being an introvert. So how do I go out there and meet people? And plus, I got so used to being on my phone, I have to go meet people in person. So we see this thing with digital dating and digital sex. So I think it's really about finding what they really like about themselves. And I think one of the first places to start with that is their own pleasure. Mm-hmm. That's one thing I see a lot. It's like they want to get out there and date and they put a dating profile out there, but I'm like, do you really know what you want for yourself? Mm-hmm. And so I've been doing a lot of that work with them. And then they see what's happening with millennials and they're like, well, they were the hookup generation. So how's that going to help me?
Right.
And so they get overwhelmed with apps. And so then a lot of them don't even want a relationship, which is very fascinating. Mm-hmm. Because they're so busy trying to land a job or they're in grad school. So some want to date and some don't want to date. And so those are some of the challenges that I'm seeing. But the great thing about this generation, I can say they're very fluid when it comes to sex and gender.
I see that as well. And I think it's a big shift in the perception of how they even think about sex in general and what is accepted, what is a norm. And I love how progressive people are about thinking and talking about sex now. Right. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so that's the one thing that is the benefit is that they're talking about it more, but then it's like, well, how do you apply that and go out and meet people? And I think it's really hard to find a relationship these days. I mean, back in the day, you met through friends, you met at a bar or a restaurant. Now everything is technology, which does have its benefit, that you can chat for a while. But I think what tends to happen too is that they get on these apps and they chat for so long that then they don't meet each other.
I think that is a great point because that really aligns with what you're saying about decision fatigue, because I hear clients all the time that talk about, I'm chatting with all these different people and now I'm just overwhelmed and I'm done. Or I've already learned their mother's, sister's, daughter's life story and I'm no longer interested. And I think they miss that spot. Like they miss the opportunity to have that maybe chemistry and that energy that you share when you're meeting out in the wild that you don't have online.
Exactly. Right. It's really hard because sometimes on an app, they'll say, if you want to know more, ask me, which is like a beige flag. But if it's like, but you have to be careful about putting that because if someone sees it, they're going to say, Well, I don't want to just reach out and ask you. I want to know on the app. But if you put too much information, I mean, the last thing that I know that I've wanted to do is read a damn dissertation on an app.
That's right. That
I
is right.
don't need that. I mean, I like the gist of things, but I think it is nice to tell a little bit more information. But when I see it, I want to know more. I
Yes.
think there's a way to write content on an app so you can have someone look at it and say, I want to know what they meant by that.
I encourage people to have a hook. You need to have a hook.
Yes.
You need to be creative. You need to be a little sassy. You need to have something that's putting out there your true self, because you've got to realize that that online picture, it's flat. You know, when we meet in person, we have all the nuances of body language and
Right.
expression and tone of
Yes.
voice. And this is so flat that all you have is what you're going to say and what your photo looks like. So let's go into the what you say and what the photo looks like. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on those two things?
Well, it's interesting because I think it's always important to put your interests, to say
Mhm.
what you love. But I like what you said about being sassy. If you can
Mhm.
add some type of humor to something, because dating can be dry if you don't.
Yes.
So instead of I like the walks on the beach, it's like, I don't know, like I like to go out and try this, or just something more creative, like,
Mhm.
what's your Uber score? Like,
Yes.
or something,
Love
just
it.
something different. Like, how do people rate you on this, right? Kind of revealing something like that. And really, I think picking photos that is authentically you, of
Mhm.
what you enjoy doing,
And no
right?
catfishing. No catfishing.
Right. No catfishing. Just be yourself, and really put on the dating profile what you want people to truly know about you. There's
Mhm.
also something that's coming out now, a dating doc. Instead of like putting it on an app, people are using their social media and they're using a dating document. It's almost like
Really?
a resume, but for dating.
Okay, wait a minute. This is new to me. So I'm already learning something new. And if I'm learning,
Right.
I got a feeling a lot of my viewers and listeners are too. Tell me more about this dating doc.
So it's like a date me doc. So you
Okay.
basically put like your dating history. You can
Hmm.
write a little bit about past relationships, what you gained from them, what failed about them,
Oh,
your interests. You can expand more on your interests because sometimes you have limited characters on an app, but on a date me doc, you can list your interests and you can expand on your interests. You can say
okay.
something about sex, which I highly recommend. Talk about
Absolutely.
what you love about sex. What are your sexual values? What are the things that you're into? That way, the person already sees it. So when you're on a date, they're like, yeah, I heard you're really into oral. I am too. That's
And I
great.
love that, because how many times I'm thinking that I've had conversations with people where sex was never mentioned, and they think this is going great and they're super excited, and then
Right.
they decide to have sex with this person and it is a complete, it's a complete mess, and they recognize we are
Right.
a mismatch in desire, we're a mismatch in what our values are, basically, or an interest, and
Yeah,
we've wasted all
exactly.
this time.
Right. We've wasted time by chatting so much and meeting. So on a profile of a dating app or on a date me doc, you can list the sexual things you're into. That way you're weeding things out already. So people think that dating or relationships shouldn't feel like a job, but when you think about it, they are work. Even you have to put energy into dating. I have so many people that come in and say they want to meet someone, but they're like, oh, these apps. I'm like, yeah, but you got to get out there. You
Yes.
have to do the work. You've got to like profiles. You have to do the matches. You create a date me doc, link it to your social media profile so someone can read it. And you can also place more pictures on there of activities that you're doing. People have found that they've had some success with a date me doc. And that's also going to be mentioned in my book. The other thing that you mentioned was really important was about sex and knowing how your desires can match up. That's very important. So in the beginning of my book, I write about sex first.
I
Like, what do
love
you
that.
love about pleasuring yourself? And
Hmm.
then I write about dating and then relationships and all kinds of relationships, not just about intimate long term. I see a lot of dating books out there and they talk about finding the one person or finding the person that's going to meet your needs, or how do you find the right person to marry, which I think is fabulous. But there are people out there that don't want a serious relationship. They love casual dating, they love having
Yes.
options. So how to go about doing that? Yeah.
Well, and it's a little dopamine hit too. I think we don't really talk about this rush of dating, the rush of meeting someone new, the excitement of it all, and that can be fun. And I want people to look at it as fun. If this drudgery of that we have to date somebody, that is the energy you're putting out there, and it is not going to be a good result. You have to have some excitement about that.
Yeah, you have to have excitement about it. And if you were someone who's non-monogamous, there's solo non-monogamous people out there. Put that in the date me doc, because there are people who are solo polyamorous and
Yes.
but it's also important to understand that, someone who is polyamorous can also date someone who's monogamous, if that
Mhm.
can work for people. So there's a way to get creative with it. And I think we are still in this type of culture where things tend to be more rigid, and we've got to spice that shit up. We have to put
Yes.
it out there and get it out
Yes.
there. And so you can weed out the people who you're not interested in, and maybe go out on a date with people that you are interested in. So I recommend a date me doc, and you can do it just like any type of Word document,
Mhm.
um, you know, where you can put your different experiences on there. And I think it's also important to talk about past relationships and why they didn't work, why you want something different, what needs to be new about this. I mean, we take everything from our past relationships, and they teach us what to continue to do and what not to do.
I mean, it is really wild that I've never heard of this, but once again, New York way ahead of us down here in Texas. So I gotta say, I've never heard of this Davy Doc, but I'm excited about it, and I'm gonna share that thought with people that I've been talking to about
Yeah,
dating.
yeah,
Also,
yeah.
what would you say to someone when their biggest complaint is that whenever they're starting to talk to somebody and they're enjoying the conversation, invariably they're now hit up with sex in that way that doesn't feel like we're exploring concepts. It feels like, oh wait,
Mhm.
we're there already. That nuance of where it's not a hey, we're both on the same page. It's basically suddenly send me a nude. What about this?
Ah,
And it
yes,
crosses that bridge in a way that takes it. And I see this all the time. And it's mostly I feel like it's people that are newer to dating online,
yes,
but it's
right.
the they're not sure how to navigate that because they might really want to talk about sex, but they're also feeling uncomfortable because it jumped from here to there.
It
And
went very fast. Yeah, it jumped
exactly.
from one thing to the next. Yeah, that's
Yes.
a really good point. I think that one of the things that I always talk about being your true authentic self is stating what is coming up for you emotionally. So
Mm-hmm.
if someone does ask for nude, it's like, well, it's kind of like validating them at first, saying, look, I appreciate that you would like to see a nude picture of me, but
Mm-hmm.
I would like to, if you had some more curiosity about what I like, is there
Mm-hmm.
a way that we can talk about that before I just start sending you pictures?
I love that answer.
And just see what the person says,
Yes.
and if they're like, no, I really want to see what you look like, maybe they're not the right fit for you then. You
But I
need to
like
find
that.
people who are going to fit. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
and to be curious about it and not just, I'm specifically thinking of a client I was speaking to recently about this exact thing. And she just shut it down. And I thought, but you know what? What if there was something there? You were loving the connection the two of you had, you were loving all the conversation. What if that person, we don't know the story in somebody's head, and what if they had an experience recently where sex was never mentioned? And so they're deciding, okay, this time we're gonna talk about it. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that we have to be open-minded, and people who are out there dating have to really be open-minded to think about, we don't know what someone else is thinking, so let's ask. Let's just ask.
I agree. I think, sex at its heart, it's all about communication. And I don't think people understand that, especially this younger generation. It is about talking. I think being in such a digital age and in the pandemic, it was a
Mhm.
lot of digital sex. It was a
Yeah,
lot of sending pictures and doing cam stuff and all of those things, where now people are still in that type of routine. And so I think what I've been doing with a lot of my Gen Z folks is just, here are some questions maybe you could ask someone about pleasure,
mhm.
right? So being able to talk about it, but I can understand shutting it down. It's like, oh, you want to see a picture of me and I'm not ready for that? Goodbye, ghost, block. Where maybe if you had told the person how you were feeling, they could have been flexible with that.
I agree with you completely.
I see
Right,
this a
so
lot with cis women. Cis women get mad when the guy is like, send me a photo.
mhm.
And I do believe there are some great guys out there. And so if some of
Yeah.
you ladies would like just ask a question, say, how about we talk about that first?
Mhm.
He may be open to it.
That's right. And I like that. Okay, so let's move from the dating because yes, we're all going to need to buy your book, and we're going to have to people that are out there dating. This is going to be your expert guide to know what you need to do. But now switching gears, since you are a lecturer, you are a speaker, you are a teacher, adjunct professor at a few different places, and also you have your own private practice in New York, right? Upper East Side.
Right.
So
Right.
when you have clients, when they come to you, how do you think that therapists can best support their clients in when they're exploring or questioning their sexuality?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, one of the things that we always have to do and what I do is we really meet the client where they're at. How comfortable are they talking about sex? A lot of times when they see that there is a sex therapist out there, they know that they can open up about it. And so a lot of times when they do come in, they already start to feel comfortable by having just some easy conversations about sex, right? Like, how do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about your pleasure? And a lot of times they're very open to exploring that. But I think we always have to do it when they're ready, because I think as helping professionals, we can get so excited and we can miss something. So
Yes.
we have to go slow with the client. And I know that when I first got into this field and being in the profession that I'm from, which is social work, which is such a help, let me solve this for you. We don't have to solve it. We just need to meet them where they're at and explore. And a lot of times they're so open they love that. It's like, oh, I can take my time in here. I don't have to rush. I can really identify what sex means to me, my sexuality, my gender, my orientation, what I like about it, what I don't like about it. And I think having that safe, non-judgmental, shame-free zone is what people need.
And it's the affirmation, it's that affirming feeling of
Right.
non-judgment and, the safety of saying, I really want to explore this with someone who's going to hear me and be able to help
Yes.
me understand my own perspectives.
Yeah, my own perspectives, because they can't talk about it with anyone else. Or if they are partnered, sometimes they want to share their perspective with their partner, but their partner is not listening. And they're not getting it from them. And so that's why people will see a sex therapist, because it's not a friend, it's not a partner. You're going to a professional who is, has expert in this. And so it's a comfortable place to be able to share, what do you love about it? What do you not? And then also shame. I see so many clients that come in and they have shame around sex. And so we tend to normalize things as sex
Mhm.
therapists and try to tell them, okay, there's shame, but you can be the sexual being that you want to be. I get a lot of people that come from purity culture too.
Yes, yes. And,
Yeah.
sexual fluidity is a hard concept for some people to grasp. And I
Yes.
think having a place to speak about that is so important.
Right. Because I have young people that come in and they're like, I'm attracted to, like, for an example, I may have a cis male that comes in and he says, I am attracted to men, but I don't want to date men.
Hmm.
I may want to have sex with a man, but it doesn't mean that I'm gay. Or
Hmm.
a woman will say, I find women attractive and I'm sexually attracted to them, but it doesn't mean I'm a lesbian.
Hmm.
And
Right.
people look at me like, what do you, but doesn't that mean they're gay or lesbian? I'm like, no, because people can have sex with who they want to have sex with. When I think of a gay man or if I think of a lesbian woman, that is like, maybe if you are someone who identifies as gay, you date men, you're in a relationship with men, you have sex with men. There are heterosexual men that have sex with men.
Yes.
It does
I'm
happen.
aware, I know, and I do know that so many people cannot grasp that idea. So many
Right.
people have a really hard time with that.
Right. And there are people in the way that we look at sex. Do we have to have sex with love and emotion, or can we have just sex with sex? There are people who are like that.
Yes, that
And
are more transactional and really enjoy it that way. Feel
right.
very
And
safe with that kind of
exactly.
structure. Hmm.
Right. They feel safe with that. And so I think it is hard to really define sexual fluidity. That's why it's fluid. It's like you can be who you want to be sexually. And I think that's so empowering.
Absolutely, because there's so many labels and boxes and places where we have to, I feel like people have to dim themselves, have to be small, have to fit in, have to conform. And I don't think we're born to live that way. We're born to be bold and bright and be authentic to who we are.
Yeah. And it's always nice when people can differentiate from their family dynamics and be who they want to be and have their own autonomy. And I think that can be very hard depending on the type of family that you're brought up in, and sort of break away from that.
Well, and
And
that leads me to my next question. It's about when you have a societal expectation or a family belief system, how do you help someone with that?
Well, we have to deconstruct it, right? We have to understand what are the things that are so ingrained in them, right? And so one of the things that I always see in my practice is shame. I have shame around sex because of the type of culture that I'm from, and I don't really know how to deconstruct that. So we have to break the walls of the shame down. And a part of that is, what do you like about pleasure for yourself? Is there something that you enjoy about that? What are your sexual values? Also, the thing that we have to look at with sexual shame is, what are the shame-based behaviors that are coming out? That's a big one.
Yeah.
So when we have a client that is a perfectionist, that I don't want people to see my shame, so I'm going to act like everything's great, but underneath I'm hurting, or I'm withdrawing more, or I'm lashing out. So we start to see these shame behaviors. And so once I see them in a session, we start to talk about that to break that down. And then we start to get into, what do you love about yourself? Self-awareness is very important. It's doing the introspection of your own thoughts and feelings about your core self. And then what brings you pleasure, and not just sexual pleasure, but mental pleasures, spiritual pleasures, all these things that you can encompass in yourself. And then we start to normalize things. And that's when I start to see people really come alive in themselves.
Well, that's when there's a shift, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
can't transform until we understand the why. And when we start to understand that, and I look at it as identity building, and I don't mean just sexual identity, I mean identity all the way around, who we are as a person, what our core beliefs are, what drives us, what makes us happy. I think that identity building is so important. And I don't know that anyone is really at a sexual peak or can find true sexual satisfaction without understanding who they are.
Absolutely. Like, who am I as an individual, and what are my values, and what do I love about it, and what do I don't love about it, and who are those people that I want to be with? Sexual, right? Sexual compatibility is a thing. And there are times where it can be very difficult. And whether you're having sex, hookup sex, and it doesn't go well, a lot of times that may really bother someone, or it may not, because it is very transactional and it didn't go well. Okay, moving on to the next. Or it does bother someone and it can affect their sexual self-esteem. But maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was just the connection that the person was not feeling, and that's okay. And then, of course, there's the sexual compatibility with long-term relationships and how that fades as well. I mean, I can really see where Maiden in Captivity was a New York best-selling book by Esther Perel, because it does get old. It gets old. And I put it real the other day on Instagram about it. I'm like, it's going to be challenging. It's happened in my own marriage. You got to change things up. And if that's being separated for a while, do it.
And what do you say to clients when they're presenting concern is, I feel like I'm in a sexless marriage now and we're roommates. It's always, I hear that we're roommates. There's
All
nothing.
the time. All the time. Well, what is it that you would want to change about it? Are you still sexually attracted to your partner? And a lot of times I get, yes, I am, but we're just not doing it. Well, take some time apart if you have to, or get out of the environment that you're in. Sometimes it is taking a vacation. Sometimes it's just going to a hotel. Sometimes it's
Hotel room sex. I say it all the time. Hotel room sex. That's right.
It's fabulous. I love it. So try it or something, right? Or are you at a point in your relationship or marriage where is it okay to sleep in separate rooms? Seriously, or get a different apartment. My husband and I just totally did that. He totally just moved out and moved to DC because he had to go there for work. Now he comes here once a month. I go there once a month. We love it. It's amazing.
And it's totally probably shaking things up in a way you maybe didn't know what it was going to look like, but it's
absolutely.
new.
I am so turned on by him now. And people are like, oh my gosh, really? And people, they want that. It's okay to say, why don't we do a little bit of separate things right now in our lives?
And what would happen if more people were honest about that and could be safe enough in their relationship to be able to be transparent about, this is how I'm feeling?
It would change. It would be a game changer for them. I think it would help them in terms of their values and what they want, sexually.
Yes.
They would miss each other. They could try new things. It's very exciting to be able to try that, because I do think that people can literally go into a sleep phase of their marriage or long-term relationship. It does happen. And I think we've got to pop that bubble, that sleep phase bubble, and Sometimes it's someone else coming into the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's someone finally having enough with it and they speak up, which I think is great, or they go into therapy and we talk about that. And the therapist may suggest, have you ever thought about separating and what would that look like? I've mentioned it to several couples and they're like, wow, maybe we need to talk more about this.
Yeah. And it can be a very scary conversation. But I feel like that we'll never get to the other side if we always live afraid to talk about how we feel, you know?
Right. And you'll stay in it. And what does that do to your self-esteem? And
Mhm.
do you want to stay in that dynamic forever? Because if you do, it's going to cause a lot of unhappiness. And then, of course, we know that lovely thing called resentment.
Yes. Yes. So I love some quotes that you said. I have made note of a few that I wanted to mention because you have this great take on things. And one of my favorites that you have put out there, you said that eroticism is a critical component in an intimate relationship, and it involves taking emotional and sexual risks, sexual vitality, and creativity. So why don't you take us into, let's do a deep dive into what even is eroticism?
Eroticism is that energy that you have. It's that Eros energy, Eros being the god of love, Aphrodite's son, that really pulls you into something. A lot of times we may see it when two people first meet, which is limerence, but we also may see it when people have had a little time apart from each other or they start talking about what they want about sex.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is eroticism. It is that pull, that sexual heightened energy that all of us love. And sometimes when people first meet, we have it and then it fades. And so there's a way to reclaim it again, but you have to do that work. And that is the creativity that goes into sex and
The
the curiosity.
novelty, right? Like
Novelty.
novelty. That's always
Novelty.
what I think of. Like that's the
Yes.
first word that comes to my mind is novelty. And
Novelty.
how many couples miss novelty?
They miss novelty. And I think things become so routine. It's like, okay, you kiss for like 10 minutes, you go into missionary position for
Mm-hmm.
another 10 minutes, you have an orgasm, you clean up, and then you go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
That's boring. I mean, spice something up, get more curious. My two favorite words are curiosity and creativity.
Love
I
it.
mentioned all throughout my book, how are you curious about your partner and what they like? And how are you getting creative with sex?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that is trying new things. The great thing that I love about sex tech now is that toys are so different from what they were years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's not shaped like a penis.
Mm-hmm.
Things are different. You
Yes.
can get creative with that. So do you introduce that? Do you have someone come into your sex life with your partner? Have you tried a threesome? There are ways to talk about it and to
Mm-hmm.
get creative with that. Have you thought about non-monogamy? And if you are thinking about it, you have to have a very safe, healthy foundation in your own relationship. The one thing that I think is a disaster is when two people decide to open things up when they're not doing well.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It
Because you
happens
have to have the ability to understand each other, to feel safe in your existing relationship before we add to it.
before you add anything to it. And that's why it's important to be close in your own erotic nature. And when you have that, that's that vitality that comes alive on why you really love each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can be more challenging for long-term relationships because you know each other so well. You do become like family or like roommates.
Yes.
And so the creativity really needs to be able to kick in. And I love it when I can see people who are vulnerable. Vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a way
Mm-hmm.
to be strong and to know what you love and what you want about sex.
Well, and vulnerability is bravery to me. It is
Oh, yes.
bravery. It takes courage to be able to put out there what you really feel. And I
Yes.
think that's
Yes.
beautiful. And what
Oh,
if people, could be brave enough to do that?
right. Being brave, being like I always tell, individuals and couples when they come into my office that it takes courage to be here, to be able to
Mhm.
talk about this because it's not always easy.
Now, you touched on something. You mentioned the word non-monogamy, and there's often this conversation about ethical non-monogamy. That's a new word that people say versus consensual non-monogamy. And I think a lot of people probably don't understand the differences or what are the nuances or why is it worded in that way? Why don't you give us some
Yeah.
psychoeducation
Yeah.
around that?
Well, I think, when you think about ethics, it's about doing well, it's about doing things like they're supposed to be. I think ethically means that two people are really coming together and they are talking about their values and why they want to do this and what they will do ethically about it. So for an example, if you were going to open things up, are you going to have a hierarchical type of thing where you are primary partners with each other and then people are secondary? Or do you go the other route where you're doing the anarchy thing where, you know, all of that hierarchical shit is like gone and
Yes.
you're like, fuck that, we're not doing that. Some people love that. So that's what I mean by ethically. It's forming some type of an agreement, whether it is like in your mindset or you're writing it down. I've had some, you know, couples do an agreement and they
Right.
both sign it and they bring
Yeah.
it into the session and they review it again, right? Consent is this idea of the permission to do something, right? Where I think ethics, it's bringing your own values in your life into something and you're being a little bit more flexible. You know, boundaries are needed in every relationship. So that may go into your ethical non-monogamy, some type of an agreement that you have together. Boundaries are flexible, rules are not. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to watch rules because then you become rigid in your thinking.
Right.
So how do you determine that with each other?
Well, and
So yeah,
rigidity doesn't go with sex with sex. You
yeah,
know, those
yeah.
two words are not going to work well together.
Right. It's completely opposite.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I mean, I think ethics is your values on what you want, and sometimes tying in your morals into things if that comes into play, and trying to be on the same page sexually, which you're not always going to be. And if you're not going to be, then how do you compromise with it?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that you can say in a compromise? And that can go into an agreement. Or if you're having a hard time with that and you are seeing a sex and couples therapist, bring that into the session and talk about that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay,
Right.
so how does the concept of intimacy kind of evolve through these stages of relationships? Because that's another thing that I think we're going to circle back to the dating and your book and where we're going is how do we get there? You know, it's like you meet, you're talking, hopefully you're talking about sex. How do we make that jump? What advice do you give to people when you're out there dating to say, yeah, now we feel intimately connected emotionally, physically. You know, we're in the groove, we're in the
Mhm.
moment. How do you think is the best way for people to navigate that, to get back to that concept of applying this in the dating world?
Well, if you're already starting to get close with someone and you've had dates and you've had some kissing and some hugging and you're intimate with each other, I think now is the time to have the conversation. Again, taking it back to the idea that sex is all about communication. So if you feel comfortable with the person that you're dating and things are starting to get hot and heavy, I think it's important to break the ice on it. Like, what do you like about pleasure? Is there something that you like about yourself? I think it's important to get curious about what you both like separately and then integrate that into a conversation. So, how do you like to be touched? Are there things that you don't like about touching? Do you have a sex history of something where you didn't have a great experience? You know, I think that can happen a lot where someone can jump the gun and they can touch someone and they have a jolting reaction to that that was not very
Mm-hmm.
positive.
Yes.
So, how do you like to be touched? How do you like to pleasure yourself? What are those things that you enjoy about that? Your own self pleasure has to be at the forefront before you talk about it with a potential partner. So, just easing into that, I think, is very important and getting curious about what they like. And when you can do that, then that may bring you closer together to feel comfortable to actually have sex. There's nothing natural about sex, it's a learned skill.
Mm-hmm.
The only natural thing about it is our arousal.
Yes.
So if you bring in these ideas about what you've enjoyed about it and what's been difficult for you, then you can work together on them. So that's where that compatibility, I think, really starts.
And working together. I mean, I just think how many people would be having a lot more exciting sex lives if it felt like they were on the same page working together.
Yeah, I always hear like, oh, I let him do this because he really likes. But what do you like? Do you enjoy it when he does that? Does
Hmm.
he know? I mean, what do you like about what do you enjoy it? Right? I
I'm a
think that's
huge
really
proponent
important.
of a yuck and yum list just for that reason, just to get people to start thinking outside of their little world. You know, start exploring other ideas. Even if it's something that you feel like is a hard no for you, at least you're talking about what that hard no is. At least your
Exactly.
partner's learning something about it, and you can be curious enough to understand, well, why do you feel that way?
Why do you feel that way?
Mhm.
Right. Why do you feel that way? And, you know, and if you were brought up in this type of family dynamic where you're now a people pleaser, how do you challenge that?
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I didn't, my parents never asked me what I liked about something. So then I latched onto someone and I became this people pleaser, or, that's how it was in my family. And so how do you set boundaries with other people and know what you enjoy to integrate that into a relationship? And I think people, they want that in someone. They don't want someone who's always going to be like, oh, what do you want for dinner? Oh, whatever you want. Or, what type of sex do you want to have tonight? Oh, whatever type you want to have. No, I want to know what you love,
That's right.
how you can be assertive, because you can be empathetic and still be assertive when you're asking for what.
And it's empowering for
Yeah,
especially a person to say, I've never really done that. And now I can say, this is what I like and this is what I don't like. And I want you to do
absolutely.
X and I don't
Right.
want you to do Y.
Yeah, this is what I want. And I want to know if you're on board with that and if you want to try that.
Hmm.
Because you never know, your partner may like it. Your partner's not a mind reader. So talk about what you really enjoy. And if they say, I don't think I'm going to be into that. Okay, move on to the next thing. There's so many.
Without judgment, without the judgment though,
Yes,
because
yes,
I think so many people are afraid to say this is my fantasy because it's going to bring up something for that other person. And I think that it's natural sometimes, especially depending on your own, emotional health, what to understand to take it to
sure.
me, this is about me. You want that, that's because I'm not good enough, or you're interested in that because of what does that say about what you think about me?
Right. There's always this hard no in judgment. And then that's where the disconnect happens.
Hmm.
But if someone can say, I'm really not into that, but maybe I'm willing to try something different with you,
Hmm.
then go for it. Right.
I had a client recently, and this client was so excited to have finally shared something with their partner that they really wanted to do. And but the partner's instant response was, "Well, where did you learn about that? What have you been doing? How do you know about this?" And this left the other partner feeling so, defeated. And
Right.
and I think that's a perfect example of how it can immediately be about that person. Instead of
Mhm.
having the ability to realize, no, 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 we don't need to personalize this. This is about being communicative and understanding and really trying to dig deep, with our
Dig
partner.
deep of what I want to do with you and not so much about me. Right.
Exactly.
I think there's the curiosity instead of like, well, where did you learn it from? Well, why would you want to try this with me? What makes you hot and bothered by it? Why do you really like it? Why is it a turn on for you?
Hmm. What do you think
Because,
about what do you think about people who are reluctant to talk about their prior sexual histories in that way? To reluctant to say, I don't want to hear about you with anyone else. Well, it's not really about what I did with someone else, but it's about, hey, I know I like this and we're not doing this.
well, when someone says that, there's some insecurity going on there that they need to work out on their own. There's a
Right,
lot of
but I want to say
insecurity.
it louder for the people in the back right there. Louder, louder.
You're insecure. And here's the thing
Yes.
about insecurity. I mean, I think we can all get insecure. And if we are, handle that shit. Like, go get some work on that. Like, think about, do some deep diving on why you feel insecure. What's going on there? Why do you feel that way towards your partner? So you can work through insecurities. I mean, people have them, but that judgment comes out. And so you have to understand why you're feeling that way. Because I think, the great thing about being in relationships is that they're dynamic and they shift and they change, and we can change
Mhm.
and we can work on our own things so we can be healthy with our partner.
Yes.
So instead of being so rigid in your own insecurity, talk about why you feel so insecure and what comes up for you. And then if it
Be
does,
willing.
yeah, if it goes into your past, it goes into your past, talk about that.
Hmm. I love
Right.
I love that. I think that when you look at sex now today and where we are, it's just so different than what it was 30 years ago. And
Oh,
I think a lot of people, depending on generationally where they are, have not made that leap yet and are just stuck in some maybe ideas that were a lot more rigid and that didn't allow for the same form of expression. But having sexual expression is like this key to opening up a whole different idea of what your relationship can look like.
oh yeah. And it makes your relationship stronger because your partner sees that you love it.
Hmm.
And there is something about your partner seeing that that brings you closer.
Hmm.
And so that's why you want to express yourself sexually in the way that you want to. And I
Yeah.
think people, where they're from in life, it takes longer for other people, but that's okay. You
Yes.
know, it's going to take time. A lot of times when people come into sex therapy, they want the quick fix. I'm like, this is a journey, actually.
Mhm.
You know, I don't think you're ready for this yet. Why don't we explore more and then maybe try some of that? Or when I have a couple and there's one partner saying, I just want him or her, them to do this. And I'm like, they may not be ready for that because they've got some insecurity around it, or there's something else going on in the relationship. You
Mhm.
know, we love those couples that come in and they're emotionally connected, but they're sexually disconnected. And yes, maybe they just need a few weeks of sex therapy to do some specific suggestions. But a lot of times we have people that come in and there's something deeper going,
Mhm.
and we have to
And
identify
it
that.
stands in the way of sex, but they don't
Right.
recognize that it's actually not about sex, it's about something else.
About something else. And when they can address that and they can bring that up into the session with the therapist or with each other, that's where we start to see a shift in things. And they can be very sexual with each other and get the sex that they want.
Well, with having you, this expert on, I mean, I can't let you go without digging really deep on something. So I want you to just give me a zinger about in Dr. Lee Phillips' way. I feel like all your stuff is so, you have this great viewpoint and it's sassy and it's so fun. I want to leave people with just like your bam, great message about having sex. I mean, what is the thing, the best thing you think you could share with somebody that's listening in today?
Don't be ashamed of doing what you want sexually.
Love it.
Don't do it. Don't be ashamed. If you are into something, if you want to have sex with 5 people in a week, and as long as you can work a job and it doesn't affect that, or relationships and it's consensual and it's safe, do what you want to be as the sexual person that you want to be. Do not be ashamed of your own pleasure and the type of sex that you want.
Yes. I
That
love
is
it.
my
Love it.
advice.
Love
My
it.
advice. It's always
Okay,
been
so everyone needs to be following you. Everyone is going to buy this book when it comes out. I'm going to be right there and I'm going to be trying to get my autograph, get your autograph in my book, my autograph copy. I can't wait. But I can't let you go without the guest question. Everybody who follows Redhead Reveal knows the prior guest leaves a question for you, and then you're going to leave one for my next guest. So your guest question is, what, where, or who is the person, place, or thing that you dislike the most and you're willing to be open and curious to learn about it?
So I will be honest, my husband and I are very non-monogamous and I'm on several apps. I cannot stand it. I fucking can't stand it when there is a guy that is so pushy
Mm.
about if I don't respond to you right away and he's like, "Are you there?" I can't stand it.
It's yuck.
Did you send the pic? Did you send the pic yet? Where's the pic? I didn't get your pic. Can you send it again? Oh, you're playing games with me now, right? You're playing some games with me, and that's why you're not responding. Dude, I have a job and I'm busy. I'll get back to you when I want to. It's such a turnoff. But I'm also curious about, why does someone have to act like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, red flag for sure. Also, though, I think this thing happens with cell phones that just because we can have instant communication, it doesn't mean we have to. But people think that just because we have that device, I mean, we're supposed to be on it. And, what happened to sometimes being busy?
I got a job.
Something else to
I got
do.
a job. I'm busy. Sometimes on my profile now, I will put, if I don't answer right away, don't have a bitch fit.
I like that.
Like,
Yeah.
just calm down. Like, let the process come. One guy I did ask him, like, why are you like this? He blocked me when I asked.
He was not ready to lean in and
He
grow,
was not
for
ready to
sure.
leave in. I was curious. I didn't like the behavior, but I was like, why are you like this? Because you're a good looking dude.
Hmm.
You just like block. I was like, all right, on to the next.
But
That's
much rather to be on with the next. Can you imagine if he is that way right now? I instantly go to thinking, what would that look like in 6 months? Oh, I mean, no,
I
no,
know.
no.
That's why it scares me. And that's why it bothers me so much. It really bothers me. That is the one thing that I can't stand about dating, is when someone is so pushy. What does
Mhm.
that say about them? Just let it flow, man. Just chill out a little bit. Because if you're good looking and we're having some nice conversations, I'm gonna be more curious about you. But when you go into this, like, are you there? Did you send the pic? What's going on? You're playing games now.
Lost
Well,
interest. Bye.
lost interest. That's what that
But
is.
one of my favorite expressions is to just say this next. so Dr. Phillips, what is your question for my future guest?
My question for the future guest is, when is the first time in your life that you really experienced pleasure?
Okay, this is going to be a good one. I'm going to be excited about
What
this.
did you love about it?
Okay.
Like that one time, right? Yes, we have many pleasures, and this is sexual pleasure. The first time that you did, and what was so great about it?
Okay, I can't wait to see. We'll circle back with you and let you know what
I
that
want
gets
to
in.
know.
I'm going to
Absolutely.
tell
Yeah,
you. Well,
I
this was
want to
such a
know.
pleasure having you on today. It was really great and enlightening and so educational too, and a lot of fun. So
It
thank you
was
for
fun.
joining us today.
You're welcome.
All right,
All
well, we'll
right,
be
then.
talking to you soon. Thank
Hey,
you.
take care.
Bye.
Bye. See ya.